The love of my life vanished on the most important day of ours. Left me standing there, heart racing, hands trembling, eyes darting between the guests who had come to witness our vows. My fiancé didn't just leave me at the altar, he vanished without a trace. And then, a year later, he had the audacity to crawl back, claiming he had made a mistake. I'm 26 now. A year older. A year wiser. But back then, I was a bride-to-be, eager and in love, ready to tie the knot with the man I had devoted 3 years of my life to. Garrett, 23 at the time, had been my world. We had met through friends at a party, instantly drawn to each other, as if the universe itself had conspired to put us in the same room. We spent that entire evening talking, discovering shared interests, laughing at inside jokes that felt like they had existed long before we met. By the end of the night, he asked me out. I said yes. The dates that followed only deepened our connection. Within 3 months, we made it official. 6 months in, we had already met each other's families. By the end of the first year, we were living together. It was love, real, unwavering love. And for 3 years, we were blissful. Sure, we had our occasional fights, but we always found our way back to each other. No grudges. No silent treatments. Just open, honest conversations. It was the healthiest relationship I had ever known, and everyone around us saw it too. Friends, family, they all admired what we had, often telling us we were the perfect couple. And then, he proposed. It was grand, public, and beautifully orchestrated. He wanted the world to see his love for me. But later, when we were alone, a small seed of doubt took root in my mind. I was 3 years older than him. Not a huge gap, but in our 20s, it felt like an eternity. He had been just 20 when we met, and I had questioned if he was too young, too unprepared for the kind of commitment I was ready for. I needed to be sure. So, that night, I sat him down and asked him outright, "Are you certain?" I told him we could wait. That we didn't have to rush into marriage just because it was what people expected. If, in a few years, he realized he wasn't ready, I didn't want our relationship to crumble under the weight of an unspoken regret. But he dismissed my worries, reassuring me that this was exactly what he wanted, that there was no pressure. And so, I believed him. For 8 months, we planned. For 8 months, he had every opportunity to tell me the truth. But he didn't. Not once. He played his role perfectly, smiling, loving, making promises he had no intention of keeping. Even in the week leading up to the wedding, he whispered "I love you" like nothing was wrong. I never saw it coming. I never doubted him. Or maybe I did, but I ignored it. Looking back, the signs were there. Subtle. Insignificant on their own. He stopped waiting for me to finish my meals before leaving the dinner table, something he had always done because I ate slower. He started spending more time on his phone before bed, whereas before, we had a ritual of setting them aside and just being with each other. Little things. Nothing alarming. Nothing that screamed run. I brushed them off. I told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, I had the ring, the dress, the venue. He wanted to marry me. Or so I thought. Then, the morning of our wedding arrived. We had agreed not to see each other before the ceremony, but there was no reason he couldn't have spoken to me the night before. No reason he couldn't have spared me the humiliation, the heartbreak. I knew something was wrong when, instead of being led to the venue, my parents and his groomsmen walked into my room, their faces pale, their expressions grim. They had searched the entire hotel. He was gone. And the security footage? It showed him slipping away, leaving me behind in a whirlwind of unanswered questions and shattered dreams. The middle of the night. Even then, a part of me clung to hope. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe he'd come back if I just gave it a few hours. But as the minutes stretched into dawn, reality settled in. He wasn't coming back. The weight of it crashed over me, and I unraveled. The next few days blurred into a haze of disbelief and heartbreak. Then, the message came. A single text. Cold, calculated, and far too late. He laid it all out, as if an explanation could erase what he'd done. He admitted he wasn't sure he wanted this anymore, that he was too young, that he had been second-guessing everything for a long time. Marriage? It wasn't the right time. There were still things he needed to do, dreams to chase, goals to accomplish. And the conversation we had on the night of our engagement? That was what really planted the doubt in his mind. He hadn't said anything then because he saw how happy I was, and he couldn't bring himself to break my heart. So, he convinced himself that eventually he'd come around, that one day the doubt would fade, and he'd be ready. But it never happened. The more time passed, the more anxious he became. The more he feared making a mistake. Until finally, standing at the altar, with all eyes on him, he made his choice. And that choice was to leave. Not because he didn't love me, he claimed, but because marrying me just to save face would have led to resentment, and he didn't want that. So, he walked away. Right there. In front of everyone. While I stood in my wedding dress, humiliated. And now he was telling me all of this? As if it somehow justified what he did? A storm of emotions raged inside me, hurt, anger, betrayal. But I refused to let them consume me. I wouldn't let him have that power over me. So, I responded with nothing but cold dignity. I told him I accepted his decision. But there was one condition: he would reimburse me for every penny I had spent on the wedding. Every single one. If he truly wanted to walk away, that was the price. He agreed. And that was the end of it. The moment I hit send, the facade cracked, and I broke down all over again. The night dissolved into sobs, into chaos, into a pain so deep I couldn't breathe. I don't even remember when I finally stopped crying. Days later? Weeks? It didn't matter. He never came back, not even to collect his things. They're still packed away somewhere, untouched. My parents and friends stayed by my side, refusing to leave me alone in that hollow, empty house. They made sure he wasn't lurking around before bringing me back home. But when I finally checked my phone, the final blow landed: he had blocked me. Everywhere. The realization shattered me all over again. Even his friends, the ones who had stood by him as groomsmen, cut him off, disgusted by what he had done. They came to see me, to check in, to offer apologies on his behalf. But none of it mattered. Their words couldn't undo the damage. I needed distance. I needed to escape. So, I did. For 6 months, I disappeared. I traveled across Asia, losing myself in places where no one knew my name, where no one whispered about the girl left at the altar. It wasn't a luxury, it was survival. I had worked hard for my career in investment banking, and I had savings. My father, a successful businessman, helped too. That time away gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. When I finally returned, I wasn't the same person. I moved into a new studio apartment, away from the ghosts of my past. I started therapy because I needed to truly heal, not just run. And for the first time in forever, life felt okay. Until last week. Because that's when he came back. Somehow, he got my new number. Someone I trusted must have given it to him, and once I find out who, they're out of my life for good. But at that moment, I didn't know. I only saw the message. Hello. A single word from an unknown number. I hesitated, then responded. Who is this? And that's when it all came flooding back. He launched into his grand confession, a long-winded text about how sorry he was, how much he regretted everything. He claimed everything he said that day was true. He had cold feet, he had been overwhelmed, he just needed time. But now, a year had passed. His career had taken off, he had gotten a promotion, he had achieved something. And now, marriage didn't feel like a trap anymore. So, he was ready. Ready to pick up where we left off. Ready to give us a second chance. ready to marry me now if I would take him back. As if I had just been sitting around, waiting for him to change his mind. The arrogance of it. The sheer, mind-numbing lack of awareness. If he had really cared, he would have reached out sooner. If he had really changed, he wouldn't still be making this about himself. His promotion? His success? His timeline? Reading that message, I felt something unexpected. Not pain. Not longing. Just annoyance. It was astonishing, really. The way he twisted everything to make himself the center of the story, like I was just an afterthought. As if I should be grateful that he was finally ready to come back. I could have left it at that and just... Ignoring his message was the easy part. But going out on a date? That was something else entirely. And maybe, just maybe, it made me the villain of this story. Last week, I did something I hadn't done in months. I agreed to a date. He was a coworker, new to the office, barely a month in, but we'd been talking, really talking. And even though a small, stubborn part of me still clung to the memory of Garrett, I knew it was time. I had healed. I had accepted that he wasn't coming back. And even if he did, I wasn't foolish enough to let him in again. But that last, lingering attachment had kept me from dating, until now. I wasn't head over heels for my coworker, not yet, but there was potential, something worth exploring. Garrett had shattered my heart, but I refused to let that define every love story that followed. So, after days of debating, I finally said yes. And when our date rolled around, it was everything I needed, classy, carefree, exhilarating. We dined at a beautiful restaurant, laughed over drinks at a bar, and ended the night belting out karaoke with total strangers. Somewhere in the blur of neon lights and tipsy laughter, I snapped a photo with him, a moment frozen in time. I was kissing him on the cheek, both of us undeniably drunk, undeniably happy. It was cute. And I knew that if Garrett saw it, he'd lose his mind. So I sent it to him. And then? I blocked him. Not my finest moment. But after everything he put me through, I wanted him to hurt. I wanted him to feel that same gut-wrenching sting. In hindsight, it was reckless. Because what happened next? That was a storm I hadn't been prepared for. The first sign of chaos came as a call from my parents. Their voices, thick with concern. Garrett had shown up at their house, desperate, frantic, begging them to let him speak to me. I had blocked him, and this was his solution. My mother's voice trembled as she described the scene. In the background, I could hear him wailing, pleading, his emotions unraveling in real time. My father, ever the calm presence, tried to soothe him, but Garrett was beyond reason. He kept repeating that he wouldn't let me go, that I couldn't just move on, that I was his and he wasn't giving up. It sent a chill through me. I didn't want my parents caught in the crossfire of my past, so I agreed to talk to him. The moment he had the phone, his voice exploded through the speaker. Hysterical. You can't do this. You can't be with someone else. His words tumbled out in manic desperation, the logic in them unhinged, twisted. He would rather see me alone forever than with someone new. Because, in his mind, we were meant to be. And he wasn't going to let anyone change that. He sounded dangerous. So I did what I had to do. I lied. I told him it was all a mistake. That I wasn't dating anyone, that the guy in the picture was just a friend, that we had been drunk and nothing more. He sobbed, deep, ragged, broken sobs, but after a moment, his voice steadied. I knew it, he breathed. I knew you'd never do that to me. I said nothing. What was there to say? Because, truthfully, I didn't even know how to define my relationship with my coworker. We weren't serious, yet, but we weren't nothing either. But Garrett was spiraling, and I wasn't about to throw gasoline onto the fire. All I wanted was for him to leave my parents alone. Instead, he kept talking. Rambling about how we were soulmates, how my forgiveness was inevitable, how time was on his side. And then, before I could find the words to shut this down, he apologized for bothering my parents. And he left. Once he was gone, I explained everything to my parents. Their response was immediate and unwavering. I was in the wrong. Garrett was clearly unstable. And what I had done, even if I thought it was justified, had only made things worse. I should never have provoked him, never have fueled whatever breakdown he was already teetering on the edge of. They worried about what might happen when, because it was only a matter of time, he found out the truth. That I was, in fact, seeing someone. That I had lied to his face. According to them, honesty was the best path forward. A necessary step to avoid something even more volatile. But was it really my responsibility? Garrett had abandoned me. Left me standing at the altar with nothing but my own shattered expectations. He had made his choice then. Why was I suddenly supposed to care about his feelings now? His mental health wasn't my burden to carry. Just like mine hadn't been his when he walked away. And yet, the situation felt tangled, a mess of past wounds and present consequences. I didn't know what to do. What I should do. So tell me, was I wrong? Was I the villain for sending that picture, for wanting him to feel the pain he once made me endure? Because after his meltdown at my parents' house, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Update. After hours of soul-searching, I made my decision. I wasn't telling Garrett a damn thing. My parents meant well, but they were wrong. I didn't owe him honesty. Not after what he did. If he was hurt, if he was spiraling, that was his problem to figure out, not mine. I could feel bad for him. I could pity him. But I wasn't going to give him another chance. Not now. Not ever. And if that made me the villain, so be it. The memory of that day still lingers in my mind, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't regret or sympathy that haunted me, it was clarity. He had shown up at my parents' house, unraveling before their eyes, and for a fleeting moment, they couldn't help but feel sorry for him. It's hard not to when you witness someone's complete mental collapse firsthand. That, I suppose, explains why my parents treated him with kindness that day. But let's be clear, none of this is my problem. Only a single day had passed since I shared my story, and the overwhelming response I received left no room for doubt. I had spent far too much time questioning myself when, in reality, the truth had been glaringly obvious all along. This was the man who had left me at the altar. That kind of betrayal should have shattered me, yet I managed to hold myself together. Meanwhile, he never even looked back. No calls, no messages, just a complete erasure of my existence from his life. So why should I extend any kindness now? I don't regret my choices. Could I have handled things with more grace? Maybe. But where's the fun in that? Besides, Garrett should be focusing on his career by now instead of clinging to something long gone. It's not my responsibility to nurse his wounds when he was the one who delivered the deepest cut. Update 2. When I finally told my parents about my decision to keep Garrett blocked and out of my life, they hesitated. They feared that cutting him off entirely would push him further into despair, especially if he learned about my new relationship. But that wasn't my burden to carry. I explained everything to them, calmly and clearly. Eventually, they understood. Their concern stemmed from not wanting me to feel guilt, from knowing that the weight of being someone's breaking point is a heavy one. And they were right, it does change a person to know they've contributed to someone else's downfall. But here's the thing, I refuse to carry the guilt for a man who discarded me so easily. He made his choices, and I'm simply enforcing the consequences. Garrett is a ghost from a past I refuse to revisit. Update 3. 2 months. That's how long it's been since Garrett first tried to worm his way back into my life. And in that time, his desperation only grew. Blocked numbers. Unanswered emails. Friends bombarded with pleas on his behalf. He was relentless. But he was met with nothing but silence. No one was willing to entertain his sob story, not even the friends who once stood beside him. Then came the visit to my parents' house. They shut him down instantly, warning him that if he showed up again, they wouldn't hesitate to call the police. That must have scared him enough because, after that, he finally stopped trying. It was around that time that I found out the truth. The career he had bragged about? A lie! Turns out, he had launched a business that was failing miserably. Suddenly, his breakdown made sense. He wasn't just struggling with losing me, he was drowning in his own failures. And in his twisted mind, returning to me was supposed to be some kind of redemption. I don't pretend to understand the way his mind works, but one thing was certain, his downfall was his own doing. It had nothing to do with me. Meanwhile, my life had moved forward. My coworker and I were still seeing each other, and yes, he knew about my past. He asked me out fully aware that I was still healing, yet he didn't hesitate. We were taking things slow, steady. But the connection? It was real. People love to talk, love to say it's too soon. But what do they know? I played it safe with Garrett, and look where that got me. If there's anything I've learned, it's that time means nothing. When something feels right, you go for it. No regrets. Update 4. 4 years. I never thought I'd be back with an update, but here I am, with news that feels almost surreal. To rewind a bit, after my last update, Garrett finally disappeared. But 2 years later, when he found out I was in a serious relationship, he resurfaced, this time in the worst way possible. It was the middle of the night when he showed up at my house, drunk and out of control. His shouting woke the entire neighborhood, and when I tried to get him to leave, he snapped. A beer bottle flew through the air, narrowly missing me. That was it. That was the moment I knew I was done playing nice. I called the police. Pressed charges. Got a restraining order. And just like that, he was gone. A few months later, he moved away with his family, and I never heard from him again. Good riddance. Now, for the part that truly matters, I got married. Yes, you read that right. About a month ago, I married the man who showed me what love is supposed to feel like. My coworker, well, my husband now, is everything I ever dreamed of. The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the grand spectacle that never happened all those years ago. But you know what? It was perfect. Because this time, the groom didn't run away. Jokes aside, I feel lucky, truly, deeply lucky. I found the person who makes me laugh, who lifts me up, who loves me the way I deserve to be loved. And as we step into this new chapter together, I know one thing for certain, this is the life I was always meant to have. And I couldn't be happier.